This is one of those questions that sounds almost too obvious to ask until you actually start digging into the specifics. And then it turns into one of the most genuinely fascinating rabbit holes in anthropology. Picture this: a group of Homo sapiens roaming the grasslands of Africa around 200,000 years ago. Their daily routines involve hunting, foraging, and, interestingly enough, grooming each other. Yes, even back then, physical appearance had an integral role in their social interactions. But were ancient humans actually attractive by today's standards? And if so, why does this happen with such consistency across different civilizations? Let's dive into our first concept: sexual selection theory, sometimes referred to as Darwin's second great idea. This theory proposes that certain traits become more common in a population because they increase an individual's chances of reproduction. During the Pleistocene, about 1.8 million years ago to 11,700 years ago, specific traits like clear skin and symmetric facial features were consistently favored. For instance, studies on modern Hadza people, who share a lifestyle similar to ancient foragers, reveal a preference for symmetrical faces. Quantified measures show that individuals with more symmetrical faces have 10% higher reproductive success in this community. Now, take the ancient Greeks around 500 BC. They were obsessed with the idea of symmetry and proportion, evident in their art and sculpture. The famous golden ratio was believed to define beauty not only in art, but also in human faces. Statues from this era display faces with proportions where the ratio of the length to the width is about 1.6, considered aesthetically pleasing. However, this ideal wasn't universal. Some cultures valued traits we might find surprising today, like elongated skulls, evident in the Mayan civilization around 1000 AD, achieved through cranial reshaping in infancy. This sounds like it completely contradicts the notion of a universal standard of beauty, but it highlights how sexual selection is culturally influenced and not just biologically determined. Understanding sexual selection helps us see how ancient beauty standards were as much about social cohesion and identity as they were about attraction. But how exactly did ancient humans signal their attractiveness if they didn't have modern beauty products? This brings us to our next concept: pigmentation signaling, or what scientists call the pigmentation attraction hypothesis. This idea revolves around the health-related signals conveyed by skin color. In environments with high UV radiation, like those of our African ancestors, increased melanin provided a natural defense. Fossil evidence points to a significant amount of melanin content in ancient remains dated back to 10,000 BC in northern Africa. Interestingly, the adaptation wasn't uniform. For example, in northern Europe around 7,000 BC, as people migrated and settled, lighter skin started emerging. Genetic studies show that genes linked to lighter skin, helping with vitamin D synthesis in low sunlight regions, increased by about 40% in frequency over just a few thousand years. However, exceptions exist. Inuit populations have darker skin despite living in low UV areas, likely because their diet is rich in vitamin D. This suggests that pigmentation did more than adapt to climate. It signaled overall adaptability and survival traits suitable for the environment. This complexity in signaling pigmentation gives us insight into how ancient humans were wired to respond to health indicators, not just aesthetic ones. So what other features might have been considered attractive in the ancient world? Let's delve into ornamentation and personal adornment. Anthropologists theorize this as a form of extended phenotype expression, where humans used external objects to signal their genetic fitness. Evidence from archaeological sites dated to around 75,000 years ago in Blombos Cave, South Africa, shows shell beads used as jewelry. The beads, often requiring tedious craftsmanship, were not just decorative, but also indicative of social status and group affiliation. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, around 4000 BC, eye makeup made from minerals like malachite was both aesthetic and functional, protecting against eye infections. It's estimated that 90% of the population in certain periods wore it daily. However, not all ornamentation was purely decorative. The indigenous Ainu people of Japan practiced tattooing as a rite of passage, marking social status and identity, as early as 1200 AD. Here's the twist. These practices often intertwined with spiritual beliefs, meaning ornaments were as much about connecting to the divine as they were about allure. This notion of ornamentation broadens our understanding of ancient attractiveness, shifting the focus from purely visual appeal to symbolic communication. But did these ancient beauty standards change over time, or did they remain static? Enter the influence of environmental pressures on physical features, what biologists often refer to as ecomorphology. This principle explains how physical traits can evolve because of environmental demands. Neanderthal remains dated back to 40,000 years ago often show robust bodies with wide noses, which helped warm the cold air before it reached their lungs. Their broad, stocky build, about 20% more robust than Homo sapiens of the same era, was crucial for surviving frigid climates. In contrast, early humans in the tropics developed leaner bodies, optimizing for heat dispersion. Even within modern Homo sapiens, variations are persistent, such as the Maasai people of East Africa, who are taller and leaner, advantageous for their hot environment, compared to the shorter, stockier build of Arctic native peoples. This may seem to conflict with the idea that beauty is consistent, but it underscores the adaptability of ancient humans to different environments as a form of attractiveness. Understanding ecomorphology reveals how adaptability and survival often shaped perceptions of attractiveness. Yet, if these traits were so varied, how did communities maintain cohesive beauty standards? This leads us to our final concept: facial expression signals, what psychologists term the expression-attractiveness correlation. This theory suggests that facial expressions played a crucial role in perceptions of attractiveness, acting as indicators of emotional states and social intentions. For example, studies of prehistoric art, such as those in the caves of Lascaux from about 17,000 years ago, depict figures with exaggerated facial expressions, implying that these were important for communication and social bonding. In another instance, the ancient Romans, around 100 AD, valued expressions linked to virtue and moral character. Busts and sculptures often emphasized serene and thoughtful expressions, reflecting inner quality over physical symmetry. However, this emphasis on facial expressions isn't universal. Some cultures, like the ancient Spartans, valued stoicism and emotional restraint, which could be perceived as less expressive. Upon closer examination, this restraint was itself a type of expression, indicative of discipline and control, key traits in Spartan society. These subtle signals through facial expression reveal how ancient humans might have evaluated beauty not just through physical features, but also through the dynamic expressions of emotion and intent. Could these ancient expressions still influence our modern perceptions of beauty? This leads us to our final concept: cultural beauty norms and the role of social learning, sometimes known as the social influence model. This model suggests that attractiveness is culturally learned and passed down through social interaction. Art from the Upper Paleolithic period, around 30,000 years ago, like the Venus figurines, reflects fertility ideals with exaggerated features. The Venus of Willendorf, about 11 centimeters tall, is a prime example, emphasizing fertility over symmetry. Later, during the Renaissance, in the 1400s, European paintings depict fuller figures as desirable, symbolizing wealth and health, contrary to modern preferences for thinness. Yet, anomalies exist. In ancient China during the Tang dynasty, between the 7th and 10th centuries, plump figures were preferred, aligning with prosperity, despite broader regional trends for slenderness. This contradiction highlights social learning's role, where norms and ideals are taught and perpetuated, often tied to economic and social factors, rather than absolute physical traits. The interplay of social learning challenges the notion of static beauty, showing that perhaps ancient humans were attractive in ways uniquely defined by their cultural and environmental context. So, as we circle back to those ancient Homo sapiens grooming on the African savanna, our exploration reveals that attractiveness has always been an intricate blend of biology, culture, and environment, a complexity that persists even today.